Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are on the dev server for the next major update Spearhead, and I thought what we would do is start off with the XF5U1. This is the Flapjack. It is the new event vehicle for the Dreams Come True event for the anniversary of War Thunder 2025, or the 13th anniversary, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Now, we're obviously on the dev server. Things are subject to change. If you're looking forward to dev server content, looking at all the new vehicles, don't worry. I'll be making that over the next few days, and we'll go through it kind of piece by piece, and everything will be available at the standard times. What I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule all the videos so it's just easy for you guys to pick and choose what you want. I might make some of them available to members first, but don't worry. Everything will be publicly available for everybody all the time. You just got to wait for it to be, come in when it's scheduled, just because it just makes it a bit easier on YouTube instead of just flooding everything all the time. So let's get into the Flapjack. What is this vehicle? How to get it, and all of those wonderful things. The XF5U1 is a prototype design, which was designed by the Americans to create a pretty interesting platform, as you can see. Something that was very much out of the ordinary around the Second World War period. We also had the Y173, which was the Pancake that everybody actually knows. That one actually flew, whereas the XF5U, this one didn't. It did some taxiing tests. They found it needed a few kind of fixes, but the problem is it was made in 1947. Which was going into the jet era. So they could either put more money, more resources into this design and see kind of where it would go, or they could just get jets. And guess what? The Navy and also the Army and the Air Force, which was newly formed at the time, decided, you know what? Let's just go for jets. So interesting prototypes and ideas like this kind of disappeared, and that's really sad. But luckily, when it comes to War Thunder, we can see them and we can get access to them. One of the more interesting things about the XF5U as well is it never flew, and also it was never armed. So you might be wondering, well, what armaments is it going to get in War Thunder? Well, what it's going to get is 650 cals. It was proposed that this vehicle would either have 420mm or 650s. It looks like Gaijin has gone for the 650 cals. There's 3 on either side of the pilot that you can see here, and you're going to have 2,400 rounds. So it's very similar to a lot of other American aircraft, where it just has a ridiculous amount of ammunition and a lot of firepower with the 50s. These 50s also have the late war belts, which means that they get APIT with the tracer belt, which is great for setting fires, great for penetration, and just generally a very good 50 cal round. You have the M2 50 cals on this though, not the M3s, so not the high fire rate ones, but still should be fine. Surprisingly on this vehicle, it's also going to get access to some bombs. So if you want to use this as a CAS aircraft, you can. I wouldn't recommend it because it has a weird flight model right now, and I don't think it's going to be very good at dogfighting after you drop the bombs, but at least you have an option for it. You also have the 500 pounders if you want to bring those too. So there are actually some pretty interesting options in terms of this general vehicle. Now, for me, when it comes to the Flapjack, I don't think it's actually going to be very good. It might have its place in the game sometimes in terms of how it's set up and how it's going to work, but mostly you're not looking at a vehicle that is generally going to do a lot. It has 2 engines, the R2000-7s, the good old Pratt & Whitneys that exist, and then also it has access, to the pilot here, and then a really interesting cockpit that we'll have a look at later. But it has a lot of power in the engines, but it's also a massive platform. So the actual max speed that you see here is going to be quite hard to get to. And at 5.3, which this vehicle is at, I feel like there's a lot of other vehicles that also can easily surpass this max speed and also general acceleration. Since this isn't a standard vehicle, it has a kind of a wonky flight model, very similar to how the Horton is very different compared to the standard aircraft, which I'll show you in a little bit. When it comes to the armor on it, it has a little bit. It basically has a chair behind where the pilot is. And also, if we have a look at the general X-ray once again, it has these spars, which are actually really interestingly modeled. You can see that the engine goes through one of them, and also they have little slits in them which is where the guns fire through. So a little bit of care has actually been taken into account with them, and I think that's actually really, really nice. Modifications-wise, pretty standard stuff. It's a post-World War II vehicle, so it has access to a G-suit. It also gets engine injection, which is really nice, but everything else is pretty standard. And remember, this is a premium aircraft, so you won't have to kind of grind it out. This vehicle will come with a unique camouflage as well if you grind it out in the event. The event is starting on the 31st of October. It is going to be a 35,000 mission score event with multiple stages. The other thing about this vehicle, at least according to the news post that I saw earlier, it will not have a coupon attached to it. So what this basically means is you will not be able to actually buy it off the marketplace afterwards. So you will have to either GE the stages or grind the event yourself in the air battles. So just be careful with this. You might lose out because of that. So just be a bit careful. So when it comes to the vehicle, how does it feel to fly? I mean, it kind of feels like a heavy fighter, to be honest with you. But it also looks amazing, which I think is just really, really cool. Like, look at this thing. Isn't it just nuts? It has, obviously, the ability to roll. It has the elevator as well in the center and also the sides. And you also have the rudder. So it has all of the standard kind of control surfaces that you'd want from an aircraft like this, but you can see how it just doesn't really feel natural. It does have war emergency power, which is quite nice. It also sounds like a helicopter as you fly it around, which I think is pretty funny. And then also the cockpit itself actually looks really cool. So they've fully modeled it, which is really surprising, because if you don't know about this aircraft, after they decided that they weren't going to kind of push forward with it, what they decided to do was they decided to destroy it. So there isn't actually an XF5U that is in existence. There is the Y173, but with this vehicle, they decided to break it apart and basically sell it for parts. But in order to break it apart, because it was so structurally sound, they had to smash it with a wrecking ball, which I think is kind of fun. So yeah, a pretty interesting little story there. So you can see here with the vehicle, the acceleration isn't crazy. When it comes to like the actual guns themselves, being the M2s, you'll have a great time with them, as I said before. But the major thing is it's going to really struggle with just being able to turn and move around. You can see how much speed it loses in a turn. It's just insane. The other part of it to also mention is the fact that it's such an awkward design. It's probably going to be quite hard for people to actually hit this aircraft, because you can do some weird stuff with its rudder. You can see here that you can actually kind of like dance around the air with it at low speeds. And then also what you can do is you're able to just do like silly flips with it. But as I said, the flight model just might not be finished yet. The biggest issue is the engines are just not giving it enough power to be able to kind of go forward with. And that, I think, is going to be the problem for this type of vehicle. So is this going to be like a really competitive vehicle? No, it's not. Not in its current iteration. It might change in terms of, you know, how it's set up, but it's just not fast enough and also just doesn't maneuver enough. What ends up happening, though, with these types of vehicles is the flight model does change and, you know, things do move around with it. So don't be surprised if that ends up happening with this vehicle. I think it will. But the major problem, as I said, it just loses way too much speed in a turn, and it just can't gain it back, even with these massive engines. So I think it's fun. I like it. I'm very happy that it's an event vehicle. Oh dear. I'm very happy that it's an event vehicle and not like a standard texture vehicle. It's perfect for something like a Dreams Come True event. The only problem, as always with this type of vehicle, is it doesn't have any flaps. That's not the main problem, though. It once again blurs kind of the line between what is allowed and what is not allowed when it comes to War Thunder. Because technically with this vehicle, it didn't fly, it never had guns or anything like that. So, but people want to see it, so I suppose it gets into the game. It also has a very low stall speed. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Aussie Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.